yeah, I get Nazis were fucking horrible, et cetera, et cetera. Fuck them too. Kill them, punch them, do all that kind of fun shit. Whatever. I don't care. Fuck them. They're Nazis. They deserve what they get. But communists do the same fucking thing.
Hi, my name is Aaron. This is my show, Reeducation, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. Today I'm actually going to respond to a video that a viewer sent to me, and they had a whole lot of questions in the video, and I kind of wanted to break it down, talk about some of the topics a little bit, and maybe answer some of those questions. So without any further ado, let's jump into it.
All right, re-education. This video's for you, man. I've been following you for quite a while now. I'm not completely closed off to the ideology of anarchism because it's extremely reflective of libertarianism in a lot of ways, which is what I am. What I don't get is why you guys simp for communists. Communism is like well, in modern history, which we call, as a historian, we call modern history anything that's happened post World War One. It is the most destructive ideology that has ever happened in the modern era. I don't understand why you guys claim to be against fascism. I don't understand why you guys claim to be against authoritarianism. And then you simp for communists, who are essentially the same thing as fucking Nazis.
Now, first of all, I just want to thank our friend here, Daniel, for sending in these questions. So this is actually a question that I get all the time. Whenever I tell somebody that is more conservative, more right-leaning, basically anybody that lives around me in my area, they often ask why it is that I would call myself an anarcho-communist as opposed to just an anarchist. And I will address that point in just a second, but there is something, a big something, a glaring, obvious something that we have to discuss before we really get into any of the actual meat of this video, and that's all the shit that you got behind you. What exactly is all that stuff? Well, I looked into it a little bit, and even though I'm not an expert on any of this, I was able to pin down a few things that I seen in the video. Now, what we basically have here is a series of different swords. What I was able to find out is the largest one is probably a long sword, a medieval long sword, or possibly a bastard sword, which is a double-handed sword or a hand and a half, respectively. And the swords on either side, I believe, are military-style sabers. Now, again, I'm not an expert on any of this, but it looks to be that one of the sabers on the far right side is a military-style Confederate Army cavalry sword. Now, it could also be a Union Army cavalry sword. I believe a lot of the swords on both sides during the Civil War looked similar, so I'm not entirely sure on that. And then in the center, we have a sort of suit of armor that looks to be something of a medieval helmet, on top of what could be some leather armor, possibly gambeson, maybe some other post-apocalyptic armor that I just don't know about yet. But it appears that the helmet itself is actually a visored barbuda, which is a helmet that we can find here, that looks to be darkened in some way, possibly spray painted. I'm not entirely sure. I might be wrong about this, but it looks pretty much like this specific helmet. And that's pretty much it. That's all we got to talk about. Oh, right, the flag! This flag is known as a German war ensign. Now, this specific flag is known as the Kaiserreich, which is a German naval flag from World War I. It has a couple of defining features that we can look at. Specifically that it is a white flag with a black offset cross just offset to the left, with a circle in the center of that cross filled with a black eagle, the eagle of Prussia. It also happens to have the white, red, and black tricolor up in the top left corner defaced with an iron cross. What does this flag mean? Well, like I said, this flag was flown as a naval German flag in World War I. But it happens to also be flown a lot by fascists and Nazis. Now, I'm not saying that our friend here is a fascist or a Nazi. All I know about him is this video specifically, and in this video he says that he's a libertarian, and that's fine. And I believe that he also even said that he was a historian, and that's fine too. If you're a fan of history, then I understand why you'd have certain flags and so forth. But there is also the question of why you would put them in the background of a video that you were presenting to me, a known anti-fascist. Now, why is it that this flag from World War I, which is not a Nazi flag specifically, be flown by Nazis and fascists? Well, it's because in a lot of countries, specifically in Germany, flying Nazi flags or showing Nazi memorabilia is against the law. So they've chosen to fly things like this instead, so they can kind of skirt around this. And if you notice, the flag itself is almost identical to the Kekistan flag, which is the same as the Nazi flag. It's just basically swapping colors, swapping images. That's essentially what we're doing here. Now, Daniel has basically insinuated that he's a bit of a historian. He may not be a professional one, but clearly he's a fan of history, as shown by all of the memorabilia in the background here. And I am also a fan of history. I like all kinds of historical events, and I usually put all kinds of historical memorabilia in the backgrounds of my videos as well. That like that, and there we go. So, I love history as well. I'm also a fan of history, as you can see. And I like all kinds of esoteric, weird shit. As a fan of history, I keep these things around. I don't usually put a lot of them in my videos because I've actually gotten a lot of pushback for doing that kind of stuff, and it freaks people out. Essentially what I'm saying is that the imagery that you put in the background of your videos can say a lot about a person. My imagery specifically says that I enjoy pugs, and I
guess my real question is, why is it exactly that you have that flag in your background? You should burn it. Burn that flag. Burn the fucking flag!
Now, you make the argument that you like a lot of the ideas of anarchism because they're similar to libertarianism, but why do we gotta muck it all up with all of this communism business? And looking at it historically, actually the modern way that a lot of Americans look at libertarianism, at least American-style libertarianism, actually comes out of the leftist libertarianist movement that was first pioneered by Pierre Joseph Proudhon and expanded upon by a whole bunch of German and European anarchists and Soviet American anarchists and all kinds of really awesome radical people. But a lot of the modern libertarian mindset of liberty, freedom, democracy, those sorts of things, that all comes out of the leftist libertarian movement back in the early 20th century and the late 19th century. Now, left and right-wing libertarianism is distinctly different from one another because they essentially disagree on the ideas of capitalism. Usually right-wing libertarians want to want to have a completely free and equal market where everybody is able to freely trade with one another and there's no big government telling anybody what to do, which is essentially just a laissez-faire capitalist economy, which we've tried in the past and has completely decimated the entire world's economy, leading to the Great Depression and World War II, whereas left-wing libertarianism usually rejects capitalism and all hierarchical structures in that vein. Now, you might not think that capitalism is a hierarchical structure, but by its nature, it creates hierarchical structures. Whenever people are buying and trading and selling and so forth with one another, eventually one person is going to accumulate more wealth. With that more wealth, they're going to be able to buy more goods or buy more land or buy more whatever, allowing them to gain, again, more wealth and more wealth. The rich get richer, as the old saying goes, and inevitably leads to a person at the top that has all of the wealth, all of the money, all of the resources, and a bunch of people at the bottom who have to do a bunch of things for that person. So essentially, right-wing libertarianism, as far as I'm concerned, always leads back to that. Whereas left-wing libertarianism doesn't believe in that sort of thing. You see, liberty and freedom are meaningless, hollow words if you have no ability to gain those liberties and freedoms. So, for instance, you might have the liberty or freedom to go buy any pair of Nike shoes that you want, but if you don't have enough money to afford those shoes, what use is that freedom? The same thing goes for basically any other freedom. Now, you go on to ask why we like to muck up the whole anarchism business with the whole communism thing. And I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding when it comes to what we consider communism and what you might consider communism, or what a lot of right-wing or American people would call communism. When we're talking about it, we're essentially talking about something called a stateless, classless, moneyless society. A system where goods are distributed based on need and everybody works according to their ability. That's essentially what we mean when we're talking about communism. What a lot of other people think that we mean when we're talking about communism is this.
Socialism is when the government does stuff. And it's more socialism the more stuff it does. And if it does a real lot of stuff, it's communism.
That's how a lot of people view communism and socialism, when it really isn't that. It has nothing to do with the government, in fact. It can. Some authoritarian versions of communism have had all kinds of governments and states created so they could hold on to power. And that's probably what you're talking about when you envision communism. You probably think of the Soviet Union or Communist China or North Korea, and you think of a totalitarian dictatorship that oppresses its people. And yeah, that's not necessarily unfounded. In a lot of those different places, a lot of horrible, heinous, terrible things happen. And obviously I could do the most easiest whataboutism in the world and say, yeah, but just look at America and how horrible and heinous and terrible it is to its own people, how many people capitalism has killed, by the way, it's around 2 billion, and essentially try to justify away all of the heinous atrocities of those communist countries by saying that capitalism is bad or even worse than anything communism or almost any other system has ever been. But that wouldn't really be an honest argument, would it? It's true, but it wouldn't be the perfect way to attack this specific topic. When it comes to the Soviet Union, anarchists have a lot of problems with it, obviously. Essentially, at the beginning of the Russian Revolution, a lot of the people that were revolting were workers, they were farmers, they were the proletariat, they were the people on the ground, they were the regular Joes and Janes of their day, and they fought hard to get the rights and freedoms that they wanted. And essentially what they wanted was to establish Soviets, workers' councils, or community councils that would be democratically elected, and it would allow them to have essentially political power within their communities. Imagine small local communities all linking together and working with one another to come up with decisions and decrees, rather than having a politician at the top making all of those decisions for everyone else, and you voting for somebody every 4 years hoping that they're going to do the thing that you need them to do to make sure that you survive. That, along with seizing the means of production and creating worker-controlled co-ops where the workers had democratic control over their workplaces, and housing co-ops and that sort of thing, all of those sorts of things are what the people of Russia were fighting for. They were trying to overthrow the monarchy, the Tsar, and they were trying to institute something better. But, unfortunately, that isn't exactly what a lot of other people wanted. Seeing that the entire country was in disarray, certain individuals took advantage of that situation and essentially forced themselves into positions of power. Now, obviously, I'm talking about Lenin and Trotsky and Stalin and all of those people, and you can try to justify their actions however you want, but at the end of the day, what they did was they seized control of a workers' revolution and ended up turning it into, essentially, a tyranny where the people were treated as bad, if not worse, than they were under the Tsar. Yes, obviously, there were a ton of amazing things that happened. The consecutive 2 5-year plans ended up bringing a backward agrarian society from the third world all the way up to being one of the second largest world superpowers on Earth. That's redundant, but you know what I'm saying. And obviously, a lot of the people were pulled out of poverty. They were given jobs. They were given things to do. They were given food. And essentially, after a few, let's call them hiccups, major, terrible hiccups, with some droughts and murders and starvation, and holy fuck, a lot of that was just an absolute bloodbath. But at equal levels of economic growth, when given equal opportunity, it's shown statistically that socialist countries do better than capitalist ones.
Socialism objectively provides a better quality of life. I've done a proper video about this before, but put simply, the vast majority of the time, socialism gave people a higher standard of living than capitalism, given equal levels of economic development. This is according to a paper by Saracetin and Waitskin that analyzed numerous factors relating to human quality of life relative to the level of economic development in each country presented. Within each level of economic development, socialist countries had infant mortality and child death rates approximately 2 to 3 times lower than the capitalist countries. Similar relationships emerged for life expectancy. Socialist countries consistently showed higher numbers of health professionals per population than capitalist countries at equivalent levels of economic development. The ratio of population per physician in a lower middle income and upper middle income socialist countries was similar to, or even higher than, that of high income capitalist countries. Socialist countries consistently showed equal or higher levels of enrollment in educational institutions. Not only that, but they provided high-quality education facilities to the whole population regardless of race, religion, gender, language, or ethnicity. To quote the article, even in the wealthier capitalist countries, public health and educational policies have not achieved equitable access for low-income groups, racial minorities, and geographically isolated communities. In addition, socialist countries provided a higher daily per capita calorie supply as a percentage of requirement than did the capitalist countries at a similar level of development. Nutritional supply of all socialist countries exceeded the 100% requirement for healthy life and growth, unlike in the capitalist countries. So much for the communism no food meme. Put simply, in all three comparisons within given levels of development, socialist countries achieved much higher physical quality of life. Keep in mind, many of these countries achieved such staggering growth and development in the face of invasion, constant sabotage, economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and so much more from the US and its strategic allies.
You have to remember that America isn't the only capitalist country on the face of the earth. There are a lot of other capitalist countries, most of which are at the very bottom of the totem pole. Some of them are the poorest, most desperate countries on the face of the earth, and they're exploited by the rich capitalist countries every single day. You see, at the beginning, when America was founded, they got free labor by using slaves. Eventually, slavery became abolished, and they started using wage slaves, people in their own country, who they essentially forced through coercion of starvation or homelessness to get a job working for the boss. But they still weren't getting the output that they really needed. Enter in the third world, or the third world, the global south, where America and all of its Western allies have raped the land over and over and over and over and over, essentially creating a system where all of the people that live in the Western world think that all of life is amazing and all of these other countries just need to become developed. Whereas the truth is that all of these amazing countries in the West are only like that because they forcefully keep the rest of the world underdeveloped and exploit them for their resources. Now, you essentially ask, why is it that anarchists or anarcho-communists simp for communist regimes like dictatorships and so forth? And most of us don't. Some of us do, obviously, but most of us don't really do that. In fact, the emblem, the 3 arrows, which is used by a lot of anti-fascist groups, represents anti-fascism, anti-capitalism, and anti-communism. Those are the 3 arrows. So a lot of anarchist groups are completely against the idea of communism. But it really depends on what they mean when they say communism. Just like everything else, unless you understand what the person is trying to say when they're talking about the word, you really don't understand what they mean. So just like at the beginning, when I say communism and when you say communism, we mean completely different things. That is essentially the same sort of situation that we have here. Many anarchists who are against the communist regimes still like the ideas of communal living, working together, sharing with one another, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. A lot of the criticisms of capitalism and fascism that came out of the Marxist and socialist movements, and they even think that a lot of the writers are individuals that we can learn from and we can understand, so we can work towards not making the same mistakes again. And as a history buff, I think that you probably would understand that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, it's not usually the leadership or the state that any of the anarchists are simping for. It's the people. Those Chad motherfuckers who fought tooth and nail to achieve a revolution, which they did achieve, which unfortunately, like I said at the beginning, was undermined by people gunning to gain more power. Anarchists have analyzed that situation again and again and again. Volumes of work have been written by anarchists about almost every single communist country, or socialist country, if we're going to be specific, that has ever been created. And we've learned things from them, and we want to make a better society. That has always been the point of anarchism. That has always been our goal. To live in a society where there is no man ruling over another man. To live in a world where we all work together to achieve greater things. That's what we want. And at the end of the day, we are trying to achieve a stateless, classless, moneyless society. And that's what communism is. That's what communism has always been. And it's something that a lot of us, pretty much all of us, agree has never actually been achieved. Why would we want to keep a medieval system that's over 200, 300 years old, that essentially birthed itself out of feudalism and slavery? Why would we want to keep that when it's oppressed countless millions, and in fact, according to several charts, billions of people? Not to mention how it is directly responsible for and marching us towards a catastrophic, apocalyptic climate change crisis that is soon going to be completely unavoidable, unless we do something immediately to stop this beast. You say later in the video that people like Che Guevara was racist, and Marx was an anti-Semite, and a lot of other things, and I could go into detail on why and how all of those different things may or may not be true. Specifically, Che Guevara probably wasn't really that true, and how, given the historical context, almost every single one of the writers from that time were terrible people in different ways. But I don't need to do that, because really at the end of the day, I'm not trying to apologize for any of these communist regimes. I'm never going to try to apologize for all of the heinous things that they did, and they did do it. If you want some examples of this, just read anything by Alexander Berkman, specifically the Bolsheviki myth and the Kronstadt Rebellion, or the ABCs of Anarchism, which goes into detail on a lot of those things. Or you could just read a bunch of Emma Goldman, who made incredible critiques of the entire system, or Bookchin, or any number of other anarchist writers. They've all looked at these regimes, they've all found the major flaws, and we want to build something better. If I say any more, I'm just repeating myself over and over and over again. But that's basically what we're doing, is we're not simping for these regimes. We're simping for the workers who fought for their freedom. That's who we're simping for. Like I said, they're Chad motherfuckers. At least that's the way I look at it. Please don't go harass Daniel. That's not the kind of thing that we do here. And if you do get a chance, please check out all the links in the description box below. Hit the little bell, because blah, 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 blah. Thanks for watching.